Nobody wants you. Look at yourself. Caroline Sullivan's laughter echoed through the crystal ballroom, sharp enough to cut through the orchestra's music. Every conversation stopped. Champagne glasses froze halfway to smiling lips. The city's wealthiest guests turned toward the sisters standing beneath the glittering chandelier. Caroline slowly brushed an invisible speck of dust from her designer gown before looking her younger sister up and down with theatrical disgust. "I told you not to wear that dress," she said loudly enough for the nearest tables to hear. "Actually, I told you not to come at all." Several guests exchanged awkward glances. Others smirked. Maeve Sullivan lowered her eyes. The rented navy blue dress fit as well as it could, though no tailor could completely hide years of being told she should take up less space. Her sensible shoes had been polished until they reflected the ballroom lights, but they were still old. She knew that. Everyone did. Caroline stepped closer. "You know what you are?" She smiled. "You're the stain on every family photograph." Laughter spread through the room. Not everyone laughed because they agreed. Many laughed because nobody wanted to be caught disagreeing with Caroline Sullivan, the glamorous daughter of a respected local business owner whose charity galas appeared regularly in society magazines. Maeve said nothing. She had learned years ago that silence often hurt less than arguing. Their father, Richard Sullivan, stood only a few feet away. Instead of stopping his oldest daughter, he pretended to be deeply interested in speaking with another donor. His silence hurt more than Caroline's words ever could. This wasn't new. Nothing about tonight was new. Only the audience had become larger. For as long as she could remember, Maeve had carried burdens nobody noticed. Every weekday began before sunrise, inside Sullivan Floral Distribution, a warehouse that smelled permanently of damp cardboard, roses, lilies, and fertilizer. While Caroline attended fashion events and brunches with wealthy friends, Maeve unlocked loading docks. She checked refrigeration temperatures before the trucks arrived. She negotiated with suppliers who constantly demanded lower prices. She organized delivery schedules when employees called in sick. She handled payroll when accountants made mistakes. She calmed furious wedding planners whose imported flowers had been delayed. She solved problems before anyone else even realized they existed. When shipments arrived damaged, her fault. When profits improved, her father's achievement. When a major hotel renewed its annual contract, Caroline proudly told everyone how the family's reputation had secured the deal. Nobody mentioned the spreadsheets Maeve had stayed awake until 2 in the morning preparing. Nobody mentioned that she had personally redesigned the warehouse inventory system after discovering thousands of dollars disappearing through simple ordering mistakes. Nobody asked who actually kept the company alive. She never expected them to. Some lessons become permanent after enough repetition. Across the ballroom, a waiter carrying a silver tray hurried between crowded tables. His hands trembled. Probably new, probably terrified. Maeve noticed, because she always noticed people who looked overwhelmed. A second later, someone stepped backward without looking. The waiter stumbled. Crystal glasses exploded against the marble floor. Champagne splashed across expensive dresses. Several guests gasped. The young waiter immediately dropped to his knees. "I'm sorry. So sorry." His face had turned completely white. The banquet manager stormed toward him. "What have you done? It was an accident. You'll pay for. It wasn't his fault." The words came quietly. Almost nobody heard them. But one man did. Maeve knelt beside the frightened waiter before anyone else moved. She ignored the champagne soaking her own dress. "It was crowded," she explained calmly. The guest behind him stepped backward. He tried to avoid the collision. The waiter looked at her in disbelief. She wasn't defending herself. She was defending him. The manager frowned. "But I saw it." She offered the young employee a reassuring smile, before helping him collect broken glass carefully enough to avoid cutting his hands. No cameras captured the moment. No applause followed. Most guests had already returned to their conversations. To them, she remained invisible. To one man, she had become impossible to ignore. Standing near the ballroom entrance, Leo Rossi watched the entire exchange without speaking. Governors had greeted him earlier. CEOs had waited patiently for introductions. 3 rival shipping executives had abandoned their own conversations, simply hoping for 5 minutes of his attention. He had politely acknowledged none of them. Instead, his eyes remained fixed on the woman kneeling beside a terrified waiter. Most people revealed themselves when they possessed power. Far fewer revealed themselves when they possessed none. Humiliation usually made people cruel. This woman had chosen kindness. Interesting. Very interesting. Leo turned slightly toward the man standing beside him. Who is she? His security chief answered immediately. Maeve Sullivan, daughter of Richard Sullivan, the flower warehouse owner. Leo remained silent. The name meant something, not because of flowers, because of numbers. Very expensive numbers. His expression changed almost imperceptibly. So, he murmured, that's his daughter. Across the ballroom, Caroline laughed again. Maeve! If you're finished pretending to be everyone's hero, come embarrass yourself somewhere else. Before Maeve could answer, the entire ballroom suddenly fell silent. Not gradually, instantly. The silence spread like a wave, as every guest realized the most feared man in the room had begun walking. Not toward politicians, not toward billionaires, not toward the governor waiting patiently near the stage. Leo Rossi crossed the ballroom in complete silence, straight toward the woman everyone had spent the evening mocking. He stopped directly in front of Maeve, looked down at the small cut across her hand caused by the broken glass. Then, without acknowledging anyone else, he gently reached out, took her injured hand, and spoke 6 words that froze every heart in the room. You're leaving with me. No one moved. The orchestra had stopped playing. Even the clinking of crystal glasses seemed to disappear beneath the weight of absolute silence. Hundreds of eyes followed Leo Rossi, as though the ballroom itself had begun revolving around him. Maeve blinked, certain she had misunderstood. Excuse me, she asked softly. Leo's expression remained unreadable. Your hand is bleeding. Only then did she notice the thin line of crimson running across her palm, where a shard of crystal had sliced her skin. It isn't serious, she replied instinctively. It will be. He glanced briefly toward the broken glass, scattered across the marble floor. If you don't clean it properly. His voice was calm, measured, almost gentle. Yet no one mistook that gentleness for weakness. Around them, powerful businessmen lowered their eyes rather than risk meeting his gaze. Governors who had hoped for introductions suddenly found themselves forgotten. Caroline finally recovered from her shock. She forced an awkward laugh. Mr. Rossi, I think you've misunderstood. My sister always creates little scenes. She's emotional. We'll take care of her. Leo didn't even look at Caroline. The dismissal was far more painful than an insult. Richard Sullivan hurried forward with an anxious smile. Mr. Rossi, I apologize for this embarrassment. My younger daughter doesn't always know how to behave. I assure you. Leo slowly turned toward him. The older man's voice died instantly. For several uncomfortable seconds, neither spoke. Then Leo asked a single question. Richard Sullivan. Richard swallowed. Yes. Recognition flickered across Leo's face. Not the warm recognition of friendship. The cold recognition of unfinished business. I see. Nothing more. Nothing less. Yet Richard's complexion turned pale enough for Maeve to notice. Why did father suddenly look frightened? Before she could ask, Leo released her hand, only long enough to remove a pristine white handkerchief from his pocket. Without ceremony, he wrapped it gently around her injured palm. The gesture felt strangely intimate, not romantic. Protective, respectful, as though her injury deserved attention, despite everyone else's belief that she did not. Then he looked directly into her eyes. "You need answers." "I believe I do," she admitted. "Come with me." Caroline stepped forward. "She can't just leave." Leo finally acknowledged Caroline's existence. His eyes rested on her for perhaps 2 seconds. It felt like standing before winter itself. "She can." No anger, no raised voice, simply certainty. No one challenged him again. Outside, the cool evening air washed away the suffocating perfume of the ballroom. A long black sedan waited beneath the entrance lights. Leo opened the rear door himself. Maeve hesitated. Every instinct told her not to climb into a stranger's car. Every rumor she'd ever heard about Leo Rossi echoed through her mind. People said he controlled half the ports on the East Coast, that judges avoided crossing him, that rival crime families disappeared after making the wrong decision. Some stories were probably exaggerated. Others, perhaps not. Leo noticed her hesitation. "If you wish to leave, I'll arrange transportation home. You are free to walk away. No one will stop you." She studied him carefully. There was no pressure in his voice, only an unexpected respect for her choice. That alone convinced her. She entered the car. The city lights slipped past the windows as silence filled the cabin. Leo didn't rush the conversation. He seemed content to let her collect her thoughts. Finally, Maeve spoke. "You didn't rescue me." It wasn't a question. Leo gave the slightest nod. "No, you don't strike me as someone who acts from pity." "I don't." "Then why?" Instead of answering immediately, Leo removed a slim leather folder from beside him. He placed it on the seat between them. "Open it." Inside were financial statements, loan agreements, shipping invoices, warehouse audits. Several pages carried her father's signature. Others bore bank stamps she had never seen before. At first, the numbers meant nothing. Then they began forming patterns: interest, late fees, renewals, collateral. Her breathing slowed. "No." She flipped another page, then another. Each document made the picture worse. "This can't be right." "It is. My father borrowed." She looked again. $400,000? Leo answered quietly. "From my organization." Her stomach tightened. "He told us business was improving." He lied. She continued reading. The warehouse inventory totals didn't match. Delivery records had been altered. Insurance reimbursements appeared twice. Supplier payments disappeared entirely before reappearing under different account numbers. Someone had rewritten the company's financial history. Her hands began trembling. "I've never seen these records." "You weren't meant to." Leo watched her carefully. "Your father kept 2 sets of books. The public version and the real one." Maeve leaned back against the seat. Pieces of the last several years suddenly fit together. The missing inventory, the mysterious cash shortages. Suppliers demanding payments she was certain had already been made. Employees she thought had simply made accounting mistakes. None of it had been accidental. Her father had been hiding something all along. She closed the folder. "How much of the warehouse actually belongs to him now?" Leo answered without emotion. "Very little. And if he can't pay, my organization collects outstanding debts." She already knew that. Everyone did. She looked out the window. For years she had sacrificed weekends, skipped vacations, worked 12-hour shifts, ignored birthdays, ignored holidays. Convinced herself that if she worked just a little harder, the family business would finally become stable. Instead, she had been patching holes in a ship Someone else was deliberately sinking. A bitter laugh escaped before she could stop it. I blamed myself. Leo remained silent. I thought I wasn't good enough. I kept believing there was one more problem I needed to solve. She smiled sadly. There was. But it wasn't inventory. It was my father. Several minutes passed before Leo spoke again. I didn't invite you because you're his daughter. Maeve looked back at him. I invited you because I reviewed 5 years of Sullivan Floral reports. You corrected dozens of operational failures, reduced spoilage, improved supplier efficiency, lowered transportation costs. Every competent decision originated from your work. She stared. You. Do you notice that? I notice competence. His answer came without hesitation. The people around you noticed appearance. I noticed results. For the first time in years, someone had seen her work instead of her size. The realization was almost painful. The sedan turned through iron gates into an expansive waterfront complex. Container cranes towered against the night sky. Freight trains waited beside endless rows of shipping containers. Everything moved with disciplined precision. This is Rossi Logistics, Leo said. The legal half of my empire. She looked through the window in amazement. It's enormous. It should be. We lose millions every quarter. He watched her reaction. But not because of market conditions. He slid another folder across the seat. This is why I brought you here. Inside were freight reports. Cargo manifests, insurance claims, damage assessments, thousands of pages condensed into executive summaries. She skimmed the first few documents. Something felt wrong. She couldn't explain why, only that the numbers refused to sit comfortably together. Patterns, missing connections, tiny inconsistencies, exactly the kind of details her mind had always noticed. Leo observed the change in her expression. You already see something. I'm not sure. But, she frowned, I'd need time. How much? She met his eyes. A week. Leo nodded once. You'll have it. He folded his hands. Here's my offer. You spend 1 week auditing Rossi Logistics. If you discover why millions continue disappearing. He paused. Your father's entire debt disappears. Maeve's breath caught. And if I fail? The silence stretched. When Leo finally answered, his voice remained perfectly calm. Then I'll recover what I'm owed. He didn't need to explain how. The implication alone chilled the air between them. Maeve looked once more at the towering port outside, then down at the reports resting in her lap. This wasn't simply an audit anymore. It was the first opportunity anyone had ever given her to prove what she had always known, that she was capable of far more than the world had allowed her to become. She slowly closed the folder. I'll do it. Leo gave the faintest smile, not because she had accepted, because he had expected exactly that answer. Outside, cargo cranes continued moving through the darkness. Somewhere, among millions of shipping records, someone had been stealing from the most dangerous man on the East Coast, and beginning Monday morning, Maeve Sullivan would start hunting them. Monday morning arrived beneath a grey sky that matched the concrete skyline of the Rossi Logistics headquarters. The 40-story glass tower overlooked one of the busiest ports on the East Coast. Hundreds of trucks flowed through the surrounding terminals, while container cranes lifted steel boxes as effortlessly as children stacked building blocks. Maeve stood outside the revolving doors for a brief moment. She looked down at her reflection in the polished glass. A simple charcoal blazer, a white blouse she had ironed twice that morning, black slacks, comfortable shoes, nothing expensive, nothing designed to impress. For years she had believed that if she worked hard enough, competence would eventually become visible. Today would test whether that belief had ever been true. She took a steady breath and walked inside. The lobby fell unusually quiet. Receptionists recognized her immediately. Not because she was famous, because everyone had seen security footage from Saturday night's charity gala. The woman publicly humiliated, then escorted away by Leo Rossi himself. Rumors had spread through the company all weekend. Some claimed she was secretly Leo's girlfriend. Others believed she had saved his life years ago. A few insisted she must belong to another mafia family. No one guessed the truth. She was simply there to audit freight records. Miss Sullivan? The receptionist stood. Mr. Rossi instructed us to prepare temporary credentials. She handed over an executive access badge instead of the standard visitor pass. Maeve frowned. I think there's been a mistake. There hasn't. Every employee in the lobby noticed. Executive access. On her first day. Whispers immediately followed her toward the elevators. The executive conference room occupied the entire 34th floor. Floor-to-ceiling windows overlooked miles of shipping lanes. Around the polished table sat division directors, operations managers, financial analysts, and logistics supervisors. Most had worked for Rossi Logistics for over a decade. Many had graduate degrees. Several had previously managed international shipping companies. As Maeve entered, conversations stopped. One executive quietly leaned toward another. That's her? The flower warehouse girl. I expected. He hesitated. Someone else. Another manager smiled politely. So the boss has developed a charitable side. Soft laughter circled the table. Maeve pretended not to hear. Years of experience had taught her that responding to every insult only exhausted the person being insulted. At the far end of the room sat Enzo Bellini, Chief Operations Officer. Silver hair, perfect suit, calm confidence. He greeted her with a warm smile. Miss Sullivan, we're honored to have you. His voice carried genuine courtesy. Nothing about him suggested danger. Nothing hinted that millions of dollars quietly vanished under his supervision. Leo entered moments later. Every conversation ended instantly. Without greeting anyone, he took his seat. You've all heard the rumors. His voice remained calm. They're mostly wrong. A few nervous smiles appeared. Leo continued. Miss Sullivan will conduct an independent operational review. If she requests records, you provide them. If she asks questions, you answer them. If anyone interferes. He paused just long enough for the silence to become uncomfortable. They answer to me. No one objected. By mid-morning, Maeve occupied a temporary office overlooking the port. Stacks of reports quickly covered the desk. Freight manifests, insurance claims, fuel invoices, cold storage reports, container tracking logs, maintenance schedules. Most people would have seen paperwork. Maeve saw stories. Every number represented a decision. Every delay reflected human behavior. Every missing shipment left a trail. She began exactly where everyone else usually stopped. Not by searching for what was missing, by searching for what repeated. Hours passed unnoticed. She built handwritten charts, connected shipping routes with colored markers, compared weather reports against cargo losses, matched insurance claims with refrigeration failures. She ignored titles, ignored assumptions, ignored explanations already written into official reports. By late afternoon, something finally caught her attention. She leaned closer. 3 cargo losses. Different months, different products, different destination cities. Completely unrelated, except they weren't. Each shipment had changed supervisors exactly 48 hours before departure. Coincidence? Perhaps. She kept reading. Another report, another shipment, another supervisor reassignment. Always 48 hours. Always the same paperwork sequence. Always followed by unexpected perishable damage. Interesting. Very interesting. Someone knocked lightly. Enzo entered carrying 2 coffees. "I thought you might need this." Maeve smiled gratefully. "Thank you." He glanced toward the mountain of paperwork. "Most consultants ask for software. You prefer paper?" She nodded. "Paper doesn't hide patterns as well." Enzo chuckled. "That's an unusual answer." "I've never been very usual." For a split second, something unreadable crossed his face. Gone almost immediately. "You'll discover logistics is more complicated than flowers." "I hope so." He smiled again before leaving. The moment the door closed, Maeve looked down at the coffee without drinking it. Something about that conversation lingered. Not suspicious. Just carefully measured. By Wednesday morning, she had filled 3 notebooks. Yet one question continued bothering her. If cargo truly spoiled because refrigeration systems failed, why were insurance payouts always slightly higher than replacement costs? Not dramatically, only enough to avoid attracting attention. 2%, 3%, sometimes 4%, tiny margins, repeated hundreds of times. Millions accumulated through invisibility. She stood before the whiteboard, drew another line, then another. Suddenly every pattern connected. Her heartbeat quickened. "No," she whispered. "It isn't damaged cargo. It's manufactured damage." She hurried toward the operations archive. 3 hours later, she emerged, carrying another stack of files. Warehouse camera timestamps. Container seal numbers. Driver schedules. She compared them one by one, then froze. Every fraudulent shipment passed through the same regional logistics corridor. Different products. Different customers. Same route. Same approval chain. Same insurance adjuster. Same regional supervisors. Someone had built an entire theft system disguised as normal business loss. Not random. Industrial. Sophisticated. Years in the making. That afternoon, Leo visited her office. He noticed the walls now covered with maps, photographs, spreadsheets, handwritten arrows, and shipping diagrams. Most investigators created reports. Maeve built ecosystems. "You found something." She nodded slowly. "I think your company isn't losing cargo." He waited. "It's selling it twice." Leo's eyes narrowed, almost imperceptibly. "Explain." She spread dozens of documents across the conference table. This shipment was reported destroyed. She placed another invoice beside it. But another customer received identical inventory 3 days later. Leo examined the paperwork. She continued. "Look here. These refrigeration failures only happen after supervisor transfers. And these insurance claims always use the same adjusters." She pointed toward another chart. "The cargo isn't perishing. It's disappearing intentionally. For every shipment officially lost." She tapped the table once. "Someone else quietly receives the merchandise, and your company collects insurance anyway." Leo remained silent, not because he doubted her, because every document supported the next. The pattern was undeniable. She finished quietly. "Someone inside your executive structure has spent years converting fake freight losses into profit." The office fell silent. Outside, container ships continued arriving beneath the afternoon sun. Inside, the largest theft operation in Rossi Logistics history had just begun to surface. Leo finally asked the question every executive feared. "Do you know who?" Maeve looked toward the board, covered in names. There was only one name appearing often enough to frighten her. One man respected by everyone. One man trusted without question. She swallowed slowly. "I don't have proof. Not yet. But..." Her eyes settled on a single photograph. "If I'm right, the person responsible sits closer to you than anyone realizes." Leo followed her gaze. For the first time in years, a shadow crossed even the mafia boss's expression. Leo Rossi trusted very few people. Power had taught him that loyalty was often rented, not earned. Still, there was one exception: Enzo Bellini. For 13 years, Enzo had stood beside him through expansion, economic crashes, labor strikes, and wars with rival syndicates. He knew every port, every shipping lane, every executive. If Leo was the architect of the empire, Enzo had been the engineer who kept it running. That was precisely why Maeve's conclusion seemed impossible. Leo stared at Enzo's photograph, pinned to the board. "You're asking me to believe my oldest executive has been stealing from me for years." Maeve met his eyes without flinching. "I'm asking you to believe the numbers." She slid another folder across the table. People can lie. Patterns rarely do. That evening, Leo ordered a confidential review. Not an arrest. Not an accusation. Only verification. 3 trusted accountants worked through the night, comparing historical freight records with archived satellite container scans. By dawn, the first inconsistencies appeared. Then more. Then dozens. Container identification numbers had been duplicated. Digital signatures had been altered after final approval. Insurance settlements had been approved within minutes instead of the normal review period. Each discovery pointed in the same direction. Not enough for a conviction. More than enough to justify watching. Leo quietly instructed his security team. "No one confronts Bellini. Not yet. If she's right, I want the entire network." Meanwhile, Maeve continued working as though nothing had changed. She noticed something everyone else overlooked. The moment she stopped requesting old records, people stopped watching her. That was useful. Real thieves relaxed only after believing the danger had passed. She spent Thursday morning walking through cold storage warehouses instead of reviewing documents. Forklifts hummed across polished concrete floors. Workers loaded refrigerated trailers with military precision. To everyone else, she looked lost. In reality, she was counting. Every scanner beep. Every supervisor signature. Every seal attached to outgoing containers. By lunch, she discovered another irregularity. Certain inspection seals were always supplied by the same warehouse manager. That manager reported directly to Enzo Bellini. Late that afternoon, she asked permission to inspect retired surveillance servers. The archive technician looked confused. "No one's requested these in years." "That's exactly why I need them." Hours later, dusty hard drives filled her office floor. Most recordings had already been deleted according to company policy, but logistics software automatically stored metadata, tiny fragments, timestamps, camera identifiers, container locations, enough to rebuild movement histories. She compared everything against shipping schedules. Suddenly she smiled, very slowly. She had found it. Not the theft itself, the mistake. Greed eventually made everyone careless. 3 years earlier, one container reported as destroyed by refrigeration failure had appeared on 2 separate loading cameras, 400 miles apart, at nearly the same time. Impossible, unless one shipment never existed. Friday morning began with an emergency executive meeting. Every department head attended. Enzo entered confidently, greeting colleagues with his usual calm professionalism. He noticed Maeve sitting beside Leo, not across the room, beside him, a tiny detail, yet something tightened behind his smile. Leo opened the meeting. Our internal review uncovered financial inconsistencies. Several executives exchanged nervous glances. "We'll be conducting interviews." Enzo nodded thoughtfully. "That's unfortunate, but necessary." His performance was flawless. Measured concern, professional disappointment. Exactly what everyone expected from a loyal executive. Until Maeve quietly spoke. "The inconsistencies aren't random." The room turned toward her. They originate from one operational chain. She walked to the presentation screen. Maps appeared. Shipping routes. Insurance payments. Executive approvals. Container histories. She spoke calmly. Never dramatic. Never emotional. Simply connecting facts. This route produced 72% of all reported refrigeration failures. Another slide. These supervisors approved 91% of emergency insurance claims. Another. These inspection seals originated from the same warehouse. Silence grew heavier. Finally, she displayed one image. 2 timestamps, 1 container number, 2 different locations. Impossible, unless someone had manufactured the records. She looked directly at Enzo. Would you like to explain that? The room froze. Enzo laughed, not loudly, just enough to suggest the accusation was ridiculous. Miss Sullivan, do you know how many millions of containers move through this network? Data entry mistakes happen. She nodded. They do. So does fraud. Enzo leaned back. And you're accusing me. I'm following evidence. No, he smiled. You're following coincidence. Maeve quietly reached into a folder. I expected that answer. She placed a flash drive on the table. Yesterday, your assistant attempted to delete archived routing logs. I recovered them. The smile disappeared. For the first time since she'd met him, Enzo looked genuinely surprised. Everything happened at once. Enzo lunged across the table. Not toward Maeve, toward the flash drive. A security guard intercepted him. Another grabbed his arm. The room exploded into shouting. Executives backed away. Chairs overturned. Someone triggered the emergency security alarm. Red lights began flashing throughout the boardroom. Enzo suddenly stopped struggling. Instead, he smiled. You really think you've won? He looked straight at Leo. If I fall, so does your reputation. You trusted me for 13 years. You'll look like a fool. Leo remained motionless. His silence frightened everyone more than anger ever could. Enzo's confidence slowly faded. Minutes later, Rossi security escorted everyone, except the senior leadership, from the room. The doors locked. Only 5 people remained. Leo, Maeve, Enzo. 2 armed captains of the syndicate. One captain stepped forward. Boss, the punishment is obvious. He drew a pistol. No one seemed shocked. This wasn't corporate policy. This was mafia justice. Enzo's face drained of color. His bravado disappeared instantly. Leo, we've known each other for years. You can't. The captain raised the weapon. Maeve's heartbeat slammed against her ribs. She understood exactly what was about to happen. No courtroom, no prison, no appeal. One decision, one gunshot. Finished. Without thinking, she stepped between them. The room went completely still. The captain stared in disbelief. Miss, you need to move. She didn't. Leo's voice was quiet. Why? She looked at him, not with fear, with conviction. Because I don't want my first real success to end with someone's death. He betrayed you, Leo replied. Yes. He stole millions. Yes. He would have destroyed this company. I know. She swallowed. But if justice only creates another body, what exactly have we protected? No one spoke. The armed captain looked toward Leo, waiting for orders. Seconds stretched into eternity. Leo studied Maeve's face. There was no weakness there, no naive optimism. She wasn't asking him to forgive Enzo. She was asking him not to become smaller than the justice he claimed to defend. Finally, Leo slowly lowered his hand. The captain immediately lowered the pistol. Take him. Leo's voice was ice. He'll answer for everything. But not here. Guards pulled the trembling Enzo toward the door. Before disappearing, He looked once at Maeve. Not with hatred, with disbelief. She had just saved the life of the man who had tried to destroy hers. When the doors finally closed, silence returned. Leo remained standing where he was. "You realize," he said quietly, "no one has ever stopped me from giving an order." Maeve managed a tired smile. "I wasn't trying to stop you. I was trying to protect the part of you that still listens before deciding." For a long moment, Leo said nothing. Then, almost to himself, he murmured, "I thought I brought you here because you could see patterns." He looked directly at her. "I was wrong. You see people." Outside the boardroom windows, cranes continued lifting containers across the harbor as though nothing had happened. Inside, however, something far more valuable than millions of dollars had been recovered. Not simply the truth, but the beginning of a trust neither power nor fear could ever buy. 3 months later, the atmosphere inside Rossi Logistics had changed completely. The whispers had disappeared. The sideways glances had vanished. Now, when Maeve Sullivan walked through headquarters, employees greeted her with quiet respect. Warehouse supervisors asked for her opinion before approving new inventory systems. Regional managers requested her reviews before signing major freight contracts. Even veteran capos, men who had spent decades moving cargo through ports controlled by the Rossi syndicate, paused outside her office when they needed advice. At first, the attention made her uncomfortable. She still arrived before sunrise, still carried her own coffee, still thanked janitors by name. Success hadn't changed who she was. It had only allowed other people to finally see her. The investigation had recovered far more than anyone expected. Enzo Bellini's network stretched across 4 states. Dozens of shell companies had quietly purchased destroyed cargo. Insurance fraud alone totaled nearly $12 million. Recovered merchandise filled warehouses that had once been reported empty. Quarterly profits climbed for the first time in years. During one executive meeting, the chief financial officer stood before a projection screen. "Our operational losses have dropped by 63%. Another executive added, "We're negotiating shipping rates from the strongest position we've had in a decade." No one needed to ask why. Every chart led back to the same week. The week Maeve Sullivan had arrived. Leo rarely offered praise in public. He believed compliments lost value when spoken too often. Instead, he observed. He watched managers who had once laughed at Maeve, now waiting outside her office with notebooks. He watched veteran logistics directors rewrite procedures based on her recommendations. He watched powerful men interrupt one another just to ask, "What does Miss Sullivan think?" One afternoon, he entered her office carrying 2 folders. She looked up from a warehouse optimization model. "I've finished tomorrow's routing review." "I know." He placed the folders on her desk. "The first contains your father's debt." She froze. "The second," he pushed it forward, "contains your employment contract." She opened the first folder. 1 page, 1 sentence. Account closed. Debt satisfied in full. She stared at it for several silent seconds. "You kept your promise." "I always do." She slowly opened the second folder. Vice President of Strategic Logistics. Authority over every major East Coast shipping corridor. A salary she had never imagined possible. Her hands remained on the contract without signing it. Leo waited. "You don't want it." "It isn't that." She closed the folder. "My whole life. I've survived because I earned everything. If I accept this, I need to know it isn't charity." Leo almost smiled. "You still don't understand." He walked toward the wall, displaying quarterly performance reports. Every graph pointed upward. Every improvement began after her arrival. "This company didn't survive because I rescued you." He turned back toward her. It became stronger because you rescued it. He placed the contract back into her hands. You already earned the position. The paperwork is simply catching up. For the first time, she believed him. She signed. 2 weeks later, the receptionist called upstairs. "Miss Sullivan, there are visitors asking for you." She frowned. "I wasn't expecting anyone. You may want to come down." The lobby had never felt so quiet. Richard Sullivan stood near the entrance, wearing the same expensive suit he had worn to charity galas years earlier. Only now, it no longer fit the confident man he pretended to be. Caroline stood beside him. Designer handbag, perfect makeup, forced smile. Neither of them looked comfortable. When Maeve approached, Caroline spoke first. "So, this is where you've been hiding." Maeve remained calm. "I've been working." Richard cleared his throat. "We need to talk." "About what?" "Family." The word sounded strangely unfamiliar. Richard forced another smile. "You've made enough money now. You've proved your point. It's time to come home." Caroline folded her arms. "And whatever he's paying you, the family deserves part of it." Maeve simply looked at them. Not angry, not surprised, only tired. Before she could answer, another voice echoed across the lobby. "I was wondering when you'd arrive." Leo Rossi stepped from the executive elevators. The atmosphere changed immediately. Employees straightened. Security quietly moved closer. Richard's confidence vanished. Leo addressed the receptionist. "Please notify the board. We're moving today's strategy meeting forward." Then he looked at Richard. "I believe this conversation deserves witnesses." 20 minutes later, the executive boardroom was full. Directors, department heads, regional presidents, senior capos. Everyone wondered why an emergency meeting had been called. Richard sat stiffly near one end of the table. Caroline refused to look at anyone. Leo stood before the presentation screen. "You've all heard various stories regarding Miss Sullivan." He pressed a button. Financial records appeared. "Today, we'll discuss facts." The first slide showed Sullivan floral distribution over the previous 7 years. Revenue, losses, cash flow, contract renewals. At first, the numbers seemed ordinary. Then Leo highlighted individual decisions. This hotel contract. He looked toward Maeve. Negotiated by Miss Sullivan. Another slide. Warehouse spoilage reduced 31%. Her inventory redesign. Another. Supplier retention increased. Her negotiations. Another. Payroll crisis resolved. Her solution. Slide after slide. Year after year. Every profitable decision. Every financial recovery. Every successful contract. Each one traced back to Maeve's work. Then the screen changed. Richard's gambling withdrawals, secret loans, forged accounting records, interest payments, unreported debt. Silence filled the room. Leo spoke only once more. The Sullivan business survived, despite its owner. He looked directly at Richard. Not because of him. Richard lowered his head. He could not deny a single document. Caroline stared at the screen in disbelief. "You mean, Maeve had, all those years, she remembered every promotion she had accepted, every compliment she had claimed, every interview where she described herself as the reason the family business succeeded. None of it had been true." Leo walked toward Maeve. His voice carried through the boardroom. Effective immediately. "Miss Maeve Sullivan will oversee strategic logistics for every East Coast operation under the Rossi Syndicate. No dramatic music. No celebration. Only silence." Then, one executive stood. He began applauding. Another followed. Then another. Within seconds, the entire boardroom had risen to its feet. The applause continued, longer than anyone expected. Not because Leo ordered it. Because every person in the room knew exactly what she had accomplished. Maeve looked around slowly. These were the same executives who had quietly laughed when she first entered the building. Now, not one of them remained seated. Across the room, Richard could not raise his eyes. Caroline blinked repeatedly, trying to hold back tears she didn't understand. For the first time in her life, she saw her younger sister exactly as everyone else finally did. Autumn arrived. Industry magazines published articles about Rossi Logistics' remarkable turnaround. Competitors requested meetings with the company's new strategic director before negotiating shipping agreements. Employees proudly repeated the same sentence to new hires. If Miss Sullivan approves the plan, it usually works. She never became louder, never became arrogant, never sought revenge. She simply continued solving problems, the way she always had. The difference was that now, someone listened. One quiet afternoon, security informed her that a visitor wished to speak with her. Richard. He stood outside headquarters, alone. Older, smaller somehow. "I won't take much of your time." She nodded. He struggled to find words. "I made mistakes. I know. I should have seen everything you did." "Yes? I'm sorry." The apology hung between them. Late. Honest. Insufficient. Maeve smiled gently. Not with triumph. With peace. "I spent my whole life trying to earn a place in our family." She looked toward the towering headquarters behind her. "I finally realized I never needed your permission to become someone worth respecting." Richard lowered his eyes. There was nothing left to say. She turned and walked toward the entrance. She did not look back. Not because she hated him, because she no longer needed him to follow. The executive boardroom doors opened. Senior directors were already waiting. Shipping maps covered the digital display. Major contracts worth hundreds of millions of dollars awaited approval. Leo stood near the windows overlooking the harbor. As she entered, he fell into step beside her. Not ahead of her. Not behind her. Beside her. Equal. Partners in responsibility. Partners in trust. Outside, massive cargo ships continued crossing the horizon, carrying the future of the Rossi Empire. Inside, the woman once mocked as unwanted took her seat among the most powerful people on the East Coast. No one questioned whether she belonged there. She had earned every inch of that chair, and somewhere beyond the glass walls of the boardroom, those who had once laughed could only watch as the daughter they had underestimated became one of the most respected leaders the Rossi syndicate had ever known.